Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Tuesday series. Yes, I know it's Wednesday, not Tuesday. I had a bit of a bad headache last night, so I apologize for moving it to today, but I promise to make it worth your while. What we're going to be talking about is how to make a project that's both a card and an envelope. So it's called, oddly enough, a card envelope, right? Or an envelope and a card, whichever you want. I was perusing YouTube the other day looking for something that was just a step above what we have been doing in our series. I think it's time that we kind of branch out and start talking about different fun folds for cards and how we can incorporate what we've learned about color and stamping and die cutting into that. And I was watching a YouTuber from the UK called Scrimping Mommy, and she had this wonderful envelope card project. So I gave it a go, saw it's really very simple to make, does not take a lot of supplies, doesn't take a lot of time. We won't even be using our trimmer or our scoreboard for this. So all we need is one sheet of DSP and a pair of scissors and a couple of stamps, and we're going to be good to go. Let me show you what I mean by this being both a card and an envelope. I'm going to untie my little bow here, and the top flips out of this little interior flap, and then you open it up just like this, and the inside is your card. So very simple project to make. And then you just close it back up by doing the reverse, sliding this in there, and then tying up your bow to secure it. All right, let's look at what we're going to be using to make it. Hi, Braz. Thanks so much for joining tonight. I just got in my last order this gorgeous, gorgeous Petal Promenade paper, and I think this is going to be the perfect project for it. So we need one sheet of 12 by 12 paper. It's better if it's not the really, really thick kind of DSP, because we're going to be folding and creasing it by hand, and a double layer of something that was thick might be a little too bulky for us. So this paper actually works out really well. This is more, I would say, a middleweight than a lightweight, but we can make it work just fine. And you're not going to see the other side, as much as I hate that, because I love the other side, where you're only going to be seeing one side or one design. So you want to make sure that you pick the design side that you like the most. And we're going to use a couple of stamps from, I took it from the Petal palette. This came out in our Occasions catalog, but it carried over into the annual catalog. So we'll use a couple of stamps and the sentiment from it. And then our ink pads that we're going to be using are Blushing Bride and Pear Pizzazz. They go really, really well with the designer series paper. The first thing we're going to be doing is I'm going to show you how to fold this. And it's really easy. I think I've zoomed out enough to where you can pretty much see what I'm doing. But I'm going to flip this, so there's just no way I can get that whole thing in there. But the point is that we're going to take this corner, we're going to bring it all the way down to the opposite corner. So we're forming a triangle. And I'm just going to turn this sideways so that I can try and make sure that I get this lined up as close as possible. And once it looks like we've done that, we're going to go for it. And I'm just going to press the top to crease and fold it. I will bring my bone folder out since this is a bit more heavyweight. I just want to give it a good burnish so that it will lie flat. Whoop, get my name out of the way there. All right, so that's what we've done so far. Pretty easy. Now I'm going to flip this over because I want the long side at the bottom. And my point, I'm going to line up on my grid paper roughly in the center, which actually, and let me bring this up, hopefully you can see it. So I've got this lining it up on my grid mat, so using one of my lines to make sure that it's straight, and my center point is at the 0 at the top of my grid paper, which happens to line up with the number 8 down here on the bottom. But that's how we know that we've got this lined up. And we want to find the exact center of this. What I'm going to do is just take this corner and I'm going to slide it over here and match it up to the other corner. And then I'm not going to crease the whole thing. I just want to find my center point. Again, I want to make sure that I get it lined up as evenly as I can. And then I'm just going to pinch that corner. All right, and that lets me know that's my center point. Now, why is that center point important? Because we need to make the flaps for our envelope. What we're going to do is I'm going to take and work with my right side first. And I'm not going to bring this to the center, which is what you think you want to do. But remember, we have those little pockets right here that we need, kind of like origami. So we need to bring it past our center point. And the measurement for that is I want the point here on the right to come all the way over, making sure my center point is lined up, to the 5 on my grid mat, which is right here. And then I'm going to, again, try to line it flush, so the edges are flush. And now I can crease it and give it a good burnish. So that's our one side done. I'm going to open that back up. We want to do the same with the other side. My measurement works out to be bringing this point all the way over to the 11 mark on my grid paper, which is right there. I am always making sure that I've got my center point in the very center, and that's how I keep everything lined up. And then I can go ahead and crease it down. All right. So now we end up with this, and as you can see, I have overhang here, which is exactly what I want, because these flaps we're going to fold back. And that's going to give us our pockets. Now here it's pretty easy. Since I've already made my measurement here, I'm going to reverse this, pick up that point, and I'm going to bring it all the way to the other side. Just like that. Okay, so I've just done a forward fold here and a back fold there. And I'm going to do the same over here. I'm going to bring this all the way over and then bring this back. And that means if I folded everything correctly, my ends should meet in the middle. And indeed they do. Last thing I want to do before I start constructing is I'm going to go back and make sure that I'm lining things up on my grid paper and that my center point is lined up. And then I want to bring this down, but not all the way to the bottom. We want to bring it down to where it's about an inch. So let me line this up. And I'm going to pull this down until I only have about an inch remaining here. And again, I'm lining it up on my grid paper. And I'm going to crease it and fold it. Just like that. All right. Hi, Chris. So happy you could pop in tonight. So this is what we're left with. That was pretty simple. We started with just a sheet of DSP, folded it corner to corner to form this big triangle, brought this end in, but made sure that we brought our left side over to the 11, our right side, we brought it over to where it hit the 5 over here, and then just split the difference. And now we have a nice little pocket. Now, obviously, I can't fold this down because I have excess paper right here. The next thing we're going to do is just cut out those little triangles. And I don't know if you can see them, but they're right here. We're going to cut those triangles out, which will then allow this to fold down easily. Just bring out my handy dandy scissors, and I have to make sure I can see this. I'm going to cut that point, and I'm just cutting on my crease line. So if I crease this down here, you can see that's exactly what I've done. And we'll cut this piece out as well. And if you need to turn it over, which I sometimes need to do to get a good view of where that crease line is, don't be afraid to do that, because you do want to make sure that you are cutting along those lines. I'll repeat the process on this side. So I'm going to cut down to that first fold line, and then I can take this and cut up to meet it. And there we go. Okay, now when I fold these together, you can see that this will then pop down. So now that I've got everything lined up, I'm just going to go back and kind of reinforce my fold lines, keep everything crisp and neat. Now, how do we get it to stay together? Because on this one, we had that nice little origami flap that we could tuck our flap into. Well, here's how you make it. So you've got these 2 points here. I'm just going to work with one at a time. Let me make sure I have that creased real nice and burnished. So I'm going to stand this up, separate it right there, and I'm going to stick my finger down in there and gently pull it back. And I want to make sure I'm lining it up so it's straight, and then burnish it down. And just like that, we've got one of those little flaps. Now this one we actually will use. We're going to do the same with this side, although it's not, this one is not one that really gets used much because you only need one to tuck your flap into. But we're still going to do it so that it will lay uniformly. Again, I stand it up, put my finger in there, and just kind of pinch down here, making sure I get it nice and flat. Okay, so now I have 2 of those. I only need one. I can use either one. Just depends on if I want to open it to the right, or if I'm giving it to a left-hander, maybe I want to open it to the left. Either way is fine, but I'm going to just take one of these. So I'll take this front fold, and now that's what's going to hold down my top flap, making it an envelope. Now it's a little bit bulky, so it does kind of pop up, but that's where we're going to take and put a ribbon around to help hold it closed. And if you remember the one that I showed you at the beginning, I had done that with some twine. So you can go ahead and just attach that, and it will serve to keep it closed. If you're using a really thin, lightweight paper, you may not need to do that step, or you may want to just leave it off altogether. But that is definitely another way that you can hold it flat. Before we go into actually doing that, though, we need to decorate the inside. So let me open up. I love opening these up. And we have this whole center area here. And this is where you can stamp a sentiment. You can stamp some images as well. You may decide that you want a very large area for you to be able to stamp and write on. Or if you want more of that beautiful paper to show through, well, then you could make this inside panel shorter if you like. If you do like to have a lot of space, this measures 5.25 by, I'm sorry, 5.25 by 4.5. And that leaves me a border all the way around. And here's where we can go in and have some fun. Before that though, and this was not in Scrimping Mommy's YouTube video, but I'm kind of a perfectionist, and this floppy bit here kind of bothered me. All I did was I went in, and you don't want to do it flat like this because you've already folded it. So I'm going to adhere the two together, but I'm going to keep it folded over so that it keeps its shape. And what I'm going to do is just take a little tear and tape and put it on there. And that will keep that from flopping around. Don't even have to use a bunch. I'm just going to run a couple of strips right here, making sure I'm staying inside the, oops, flap. Ooh, boy, rolled that tear and tape all the way across the screen there. Little acrobatics. You want to make sure you don't have any overhang, because if you do, that could make the flap stick to your card, making it hard to open up. Okay, get rid of this little piece that's stuck to my finger. And now we're going to just burnish it down. If I can figure out where my bone folder went, there it is. Use my little pokey tool to pull it off, which sometimes can be a little challenging. There we go. Do both sides here. And then I'm just, because I've already folded and burnished this, I don't have to worry about it lining up so much. It's naturally going to fall. And now I don't have that floppiness. And that also helped, I think, when I closed it up, keep it from being too bulky, because it stuck together better. And you certainly could do that for any of the flaps that you see in here that might bother you. So for instance, right here, if you wanted to seal that edge up and that edge up as well, you could. Just make sure that you leave this open. But let's go ahead and work on the inside. So I'm going to bring out my 5.25 by 4.5. And we're going to stamp a sentiment on it. And the sentiment that I chose is from Petal Palette. And I thought this kind of looks a little bit like wedding paper, or at the least, lovey-dovey paper. So I thought this sentiment that says some things are just meant to be, like the two of you together, would be lovely for it. I just got back from a bridal shower, and I think that would also be a lovely sentiment for that. I'm going to go ahead and take my Blushing Bride ink pad, ink up my stamp. And because this is red rubber and I haven't put the sticker on the back, I'm going to go ahead and stamp it on my grid paper just to make sure I have my stamp lined up. And it looks like I do. I think I need to re-ink my Blushing Bride here. And then decide where you want it. I can put it at the top here. I can put it in the center, wherever you're comfortable. If you want to write a very kind of lengthy inside handwritten note, then I'd put it more towards the top. But I'm just going to go ahead and making sure that this is lined up here. Just going to put it towards the center. And there we go. Looks lovely. And actually, hang on a second. I am going to zoom in, if I can here, with my handy dandy little camera. Maybe. Oh, sure. Now my mouse has decided not to work. But let's see if I can zoom in just a little bit to make it easier for you to see. There we go. Had to zoom out when we were doing our first folds, but I think we'll be good with this now. Hi, Judy. Hi, Lori. Thank you both for joining this evening. All right, so that's our sentiment. And then I'm going to show you a little trick. I have a floral stamp that I want to use. It also is from our Petal palette. It's this one right here. I just fell in love with it. It has both flowers and leaves on it, and I could stamp it in black or in gray and then color it in, but I'm going to make it look a little more watercolor than that. And what I mean is I'm going to try and put the Blushing Bride on just the flowers and then come back in with my Pear Pizzazz and ink up the leaves. And this way I don't have to worry about doing it in one color and then inking and trying to line it up, although with your Stamparatus you certainly could. And for me to be able to see that, I have to bring the ink pad to the stamp rather than the other way around. So I'm going to try and get the stem and the leaves. And it's okay, I don't mind if I get a little bit of green up there on the floral part. It just makes it look more organic. And then I rotate my stamp here and come in with my Blushing Bride. And I want to be very careful because obviously we don't want to contaminate our ink pad, our pink ink pad, with green ink. But if I hold it at just the right angle, it should work just fine. I'm going to huff on it, which means just blowing my hot, moist breath across it to make sure, since it's been a couple seconds since I did the Pear Pizzazz, I can reactivate it by huffing. So just like that, then decide where I want to put it and stamp it down. And now you can see that in that one process, I was able to use 2 different colors of ink on my stamp. So just a little trick. It's kind of hard to do if you have a really defined stamp where you need crisp, clean edges. But when it's a more artistic impression stamp like this is, then that tends to work out just fine. And that's all I'm going to put on the inside. That way I leave myself room still to go in and write a little note. We'll bring back in our base here. And I'm just going to attach it flush to the base using some Tombow. And you don't have to use a ton. It's a little bit trickier for me to line up just because, my goodness, that's a lot of flowers. So that's another reason I like to use my Tombow, so I can wiggle it around and get it centrally located. And I think that looks pretty good. What do you guys think? Hi, Amy. All right. So we're almost done. We've got the inside done. Now let's go ahead and work on our outside. I'm going to go ahead and close up my flap just because that's going to help me with my placement of things. And by that I mean the very first thing I want to put on is my ribbon. And the reason for that is I can trap my ribbon down in this front part where I'm going to do embellishments, just like I did here. You see how I trapped the jute twine behind that, and that's what I want to do with my ribbon. I will still put a little bit of probably tear and tape or maybe even glue dots just on the other side to make sure that it's easy to close up. I'm just going to pull this here and see about how much I need. And I think that's going to work just fine. To be on the safe side, I'm going to go ahead and just going to do this in a simple knot. Some people call it a false bow because when you're done, the little tails make it look like a bow. So let me pull this around, trying to kind of keep it as straight as I can. And then certainly you can tie a bow, and actually I might have enough here that I can do that. Let's just see. Well, goodness, if I could get my fat fingers out of the way, I might be able to. Probably should have cut this a little bit longer for doing that. But I know approximately where I want it, and that was the important thing. Now that I have this placed, I can go ahead, and I think what I'll do is just use a little bit of tear and tape here on this side for this. You want to make sure that you're not putting the tear and tape over on this side and attaching the left-hand ribbon to it, or you'll never get it open. So I'm going to do one part at a time. And I want to make sure that my ribbon is lining up with the center points of my little origami flat. I'm not going to use a ton of it. You can use however much you're comfortable with, but I just more or less want to tack it down. So 2 smaller pieces of this should do just fine. So I'll line it up one more time, and I'm just going to put it right here, just to the right of that point. And then I'll put one right here. And the one on this side, I'm going to put more towards the edge because that's where my ribbon's going to come around. And I don't want it slipping back behind. Okay? And let me show you what I mean by that. So I'll work on this side first. I already have the ribbon going behind the envelope. If I peel that off, now I'm going to bring this up, and I'm just going to stick that part down. And now when the recipient opens it, that ribbon is still going to stay right with that flap. It will also help keep it lined up when you are tying it. Okay, so I've got that side. Let's go ahead and do the same over here. And again, I want to make sure I'm lining up with that point, and I'm going to attach it just like that. All right. And then this is how it's going to work. So it will tie just like this. So you can see what I'm talking about. I'm not going to tie it right now because we still have a little more work to do here. And I did go ahead and stamp that same flower one more time, and I die cut it because we're going to attach that on top of this stitched square shape that I cut out of Blushing Bride. And because I didn't want to lay it flat on there, the colors kind of get lost when they're that close together. I went ahead and using the layering squares, cut a slightly larger. It's just the perfect fit for being on top of that, the origami part of the flap. And now when I lay that down, you can see there's a lot more contrast, so much easier to see. Hi, Lee. It is beautiful paper, isn't it? Okay, and I am going to glue down. So if I bring this back over, you can see I trapped the twine behind the solid white panel. So I'm going to go ahead and attach my Blushing Bride piece to my layering square just with a tombow, because we'll prop the whole thing up with dimensionals to trap the ribbon. Let me show you what I mean. Again, you don't have to use a ton of glue, but I want to make sure I line this up. Get it as straight as I can. That looks good. And then you can decide also if you wanted to prop, I guess you can't see that. If you wanted to prop the flower up with a dimensional, you certainly can. And actually, I think with this one, I will. I like kind of the shadows that that creates behind it. So I'll take out my dimensionals right here. And I'm just going to use a couple of them. And one more right there. Actually, I think I'll use a piece of one there. Always save the edges of your dimensional sheets. They work really well for small spaces like this. You also could use your mini dimensionals for it. And now I'll go ahead and peel off my backings. Like that. And I'll line this up using my grid paper. Then I can decide if I want to go that way, if I want to go that way, however you want to put it on there. Okay, now we're ready to attach this to this. I think I am going to go ahead and tie this down for the moment, just so I can make sure that I'm going to be able to trap that ribbon. And actually, I think I can hold this with my reverse tweezers, just like that. So I can see that is going across those two corners. So to trap the ribbon, because I still want a little bit of movement, I don't want this pulling this up, I'm just going to put dimensionals, I think, at the top and the bottom portions of my layering panel. So let's see how we can do that. It's probably going to take more than one because I don't want there to be depression on the sides, but let's see how we can do this. I'll start with one at the top and one at the bottom. I haven't peeled the backings off yet, so I'm just checking it. And you know, I think that's actually, well, it's a little bit wobbly. I think I will come down just to about there. So for that, I'm going to use the edges. So we'll come across here. Oh, good grief, these things just stick to my fingernails like you wouldn't believe. And we'll put a couple more. And that will give it some nice stability so with that it doesn't rock back and forth like it was doing without them. Okay, and let's do one more. Just make this a longer one. Okay, put this along the bottom. Now I still have a nice track for my ribbon to fit through, but as you can see, that gives it a lot more stability. All right, so I'll peel the backings off. Bring this down, making sure that my ribbon is lined up and that I'm lining it up with the edges of that little origami flap, just like that. And now what you can see is it traps that ribbon, and that's what I wanted to do. It still can be opened up easily just by pulling it through there. and putting it back through there, just sliding it back through there. Now, alternately, what you could do is you could run it just, I was going to say you could run it just behind there, but I guess you can't. So the better thing is just to go ahead and make sure that you have enough of a track there where you can just slide your ribbon through and have it come out the other end. I think I got my track a little wobbly there, but it was easier, I think, with the twine because it stayed down better. But that's how you're going to do it. Okay. Now you can go back when you're done. I always like to give things another press. And then if you find that things are still a little too bulky, I'll show you one other trick. This is going to limit the way you can open it. But what you can do is take this flap and glue that down to there if you know that your top flap is going to fit in the front pocket. And because I've gone ahead and embellished mine, I do know that that is always where that flap is going to go. So I am going to go ahead and just glue down. And you can use either liquid glue or you can use your tear and tape. Either one is fine. But what you can do if you're not going to use this flap is just glue that part down. Make sure that and I'm just going to do it on this one corner here, just like that. And that will help cut down some. Now, obviously, you can't do that with this one because you do need to be able to slide your envelope flap in there. But that will help cut down on the bulkiness. All right, any questions about how we made this envelope card? Okay, well, if you've not seen the new Petal Promenade DSP paper, oh, I highly, highly encourage you to look it up in the catalog. Even that doesn't do it justice, though. It is so, so pretty. Very spring-like, perfect for weddings, for bridal showers, just feminine cards in general. So I can't recommend it enough. And remember that starting July 1st, we're having our buy three, get one, pardon me, paper sale. It's not all of the DSP that's in the annual catalog, but there's a very good selection. So it'll be perfect time to stock up on those papers. All right. Well, I will say goodnight to everyone. I hope you enjoyed tonight's envelope card. I will have it posted on YouTube and on my blog probably sometime tomorrow. And I will see you all next week. Bye-bye now.